today's Cose WebEd webinar. Today's topic is Trade Show Exhibit Secret Sauce, and will be presented by our good friend, Matt Radicelli. He is the founder and CEO of Rock the House. Rock the House is a full-service entity and exceeding the expectations of their clients. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to go over a few housekeeping items. My name is Angela Finding, and I will be your organizer for today. We want to make sure today's webinar is extremely valuable for you, so we ask that you submit all questions by clicking on the questions button in your control panel and typing your question. Those questions are only visible to me, so I will collect them all, and we will do a Q&A at the end of Matt's presentation. Without further ado, I would like to hand it over to Matt. Thank you, Matt.
House. We've had the good fortune of being, and our company does entertainment and production services. We do everything from social events, corporate events, nonprofits, and lots of other things. So today, our goal is to share the experience and knowledge that we've had over the last few years and to talk directly with you about what it is that we think you can do very, very easily to make your trade show and exhibit experience even better. So we're going to switch over right now to my presentation. And Angela, can you see my screen?
I sure can.
Okay. So everything we do centers around the word rock and rock star. And this is going to be trade secrets that I do for my family. 5 and 4. This picture's a couple years old, but that pretty much sums up my life at home. This is our team. The second most important group in my life, the Rock the House team. Rock the House really represents everything amazing that we do possible. And I want to say thank you to all of them. Why people respond and do what they do, I can only tell you that I know what works and I know what makes me feel good, or what I see that doesn't make me feel good, and what I think is awkward when it comes to exhibits and trade shows. All right, so jumping right into it. The opportunity at SBC is very interesting because we get to work with small business owners and a couple larger businesses that are at the show, but we really get to see people that are growing. We get to see year to year how successful things are going. And as we progress through this, Angela, we're going to have, approximately 10 to 15 minutes via Cose as well, but reach out at any. So the first thing we want to do is, okay, we're going to see how you measure up. So jumping right in, I'd like to know, based on your existing meet before the show, this is question number 2, and define what success is. What is success for you at your show? Does that mean that you are 10 leads? Are you going to try and sign up 10 customers? Are you going to try? Do you actually put together a staff schedule, and do you schedule breaks? Do you know who's going to be at your booth at what time? Do you know what time they're allowed to leave, use the washroom, eat lunch, eat dinner, whatever that's going to be? Do you have a schedule? That's question 3. Do you have a creative booth design that extends above and beyond a 6-foot or 8-foot table with some chairs? Yes or no? That's your 4th question. 5th question is, do you have something interactive or an activity at your booth, or do you give something fun away that attracts people or attendees to your booth? That's question number 5. Question number 6 is, do you look professional? Does your team have a dress code or a uniform that sets it off and shows everybody in the room who you are as a group? Your next question is, do you have checklists for everything? Do you have a list that tells you need to bring a box of pens, 7 clipboards, 2 laptops, cash for parking, and all the things that you need to avoid stress the day of the show? Yes or no? Next question. Does your staff move around, or do they sit down at your booth? So do you sit in chairs, or do you guys move around? Yes, if you move around. Second to last, do you meet during the show and pivot if you need to? Do you have some sort of meeting in the middle of the day or throughout the showcase if it's over a couple days, and try to make decisions to change what you're doing, change your strategies and your tactics to achieve your successful goals, or what you define as success for your goals? And lastly, do you have a post-mortem meeting after the event? Do you get together with your team and talk about what went great, what didn't go great, and do you follow up with customers or prospects? So there's your pre-test. I would invite you to send a message to Angela as an interactive portion of this session. I see that we've got 20-something that are actually participating right now, which is awesome. I would love it if you would just send over your grade, just so she can give me some feedback as we're going about what your grade was. So what was your grade? Did you get 3 yeses? Did you get 5 yeses? Did you get 10 yeses? I'd love to know. So we're going to send those over now. I'm going to give you 10 seconds. And here we go. Moving on, if you know what that grade was and you either sent it over to us or you just had it in your head, this is what your grades are. If you got 3 or less, you can do way better. All right? There are some real simple things on here that don't cost a lot of money that can really make the difference between you having a successful trade show experience or not. If you got 4 through 6, means you're doing okay. You're actually better than the rest of the world, in my opinion. But if you are at 7 or higher, you're doing really well. If you got 7 or 8 right, you're thriving. It means your business and your trade show experience is probably pretty good, and that the more that you see these things, they click, they make sense to you. And if you've got 9 or 10 of them right, you're doing an absolutely great job, and people probably compliment you and pat you on the back at what a pleasure it is to work with you at trade shows as they see your team exhibit. When we move through these, I want you to take a look at this picture. What's wrong with this picture? What do you think, Angela?
I think she needs to get off her phone.
Yeah, I think she needs to get off her phone. I see that there's also some other things on the table I would note, and there's a table. In my opinion, while this may be a casual show, and I don't know that, she's dressed very casually. She's on her phone. She's not engaging. She's sitting in a chair back there, and there's food on the table. So there's a lot of things we're going to talk about. So what's wrong with this picture? Everything is wrong with this picture. All right? So we'll start with the first thing. Let's avoid using a table if you can. Now, I'm not saying that tables are off limits or they don't have their purpose. But as far as what you use a table for, a table is just used to hold something up, not to hold you up and not to create a barrier between you and the attendees. So you see a table and you see easy. I see the Great Wall of China when I see a table. I see a wall that is essentially between you and attendees that is a stop point, all right, for what's happening, and it is going to stop you from converting the number of leads or getting to the successful point that you have. Consider, okay, I'm going to do a lot of these don'ts and do's. Do, however, create a booth that's got an open and inviting environment. Now, this is just one very generic example of something that has table space for you to put materials and other things, maybe a laptop or someplace to fill out a form. But it's a nice, large backdrop, nice visuals, it's attractive to look at, and it makes you want to stand there. It makes you want to interact and come to it. And that's what we want to see happen. Make it inviting. Next thing on our list, you saw that the young lady was sitting in a chair. We have a rule at Rock the House. There simply is no sitting down. You don't get to sit or lean against anything because it just isn't professional and it leaves you in a very, very closed scenario. So if you can't sit, what are your other options? You really need to move around. You need to walk out a couple feet, which SBC completely supports, the ability to reach out your hand and say hello. And I will tell you, there's some trade shows that don't want you to do that because some people have taken advantage. We're very fortunate with Cose and the SBC event that they're okay with you reaching that hand out, taking a couple steps out in front of your booth and greeting guests. Please be cautious, though, that can be perceived, if you take it too far, as poaching from the traffic that may have been heading towards another booth. So when you get to your booth space, be sure to shake hands and be friendly with everybody around you. It's one of the most important things you can do is to interact with not just the attendees, but with the other vendors and exhibitors that are around you. Okay, so what are you going to do? You're going to greet everybody around you and move around. Talked about the table and what's on the table. This is my way of saying don't be passive and don't just leave things on the table with a small sign, even though it's a neat little analogy or example. Don't just put a sign next to a candy bowl that says, please take one, and you want people to take your flyers. There's a real good chance that you spent good money on the booth that you're going to have. And if you want to get great results, you need to take an active participatory way in making yourself unique and fun, getting people to approach you, shaking hands, and getting them to inquire about what it is that you have to offer. And I'm just going to flip back one more second. Please take one in that capacity of just putting things out on a table. Doesn't work for me. And it's not how Rock the House rolls, and it's not how anybody that I know that exhibits successfully handles their booth spaces. Something from a professionalism level that really bothers me is people eating within their booth. And eating could be anything from sometimes as aggressive as a Starbucks cup that's left on the table, all the way to somebody having a wrap or a salad in a container that you could tell came from the show or came from a deli from down the street. And I want to say, I don't have any love lost for those individuals because they need to eat. Nourishment and break time is really important. But what it shows is a lack of planning, in my perspective, because at that same moment that you go to take a sip of a coffee, that's visible, I should say, or you go to eat that salad, you're probably there because there's nobody to relieve you, and you're probably there because you didn't have a break schedule or anticipate the break schedule of the show so you could eat at those times. And what it does is it digs into your productivity, not only your productivity, but your professionalism. So our suggestion is to set a schedule. And a schedule does a lot when it comes to making your team more organized, minimizing stress. A lot of these points that I'm bringing up really have to do with avoiding these landmines or these potholes that just put you in a bad mood the day of a show. So setting a schedule is one of the easiest things. I want to know what time my staff are going to be there. I'm going to know that we're going to have a huddle before we start. Susie Smith is going to know that at 10:45 she has a 15-minute break to go return emails, make a phone call, etc., and that maybe everybody breaks at 12:30 for lunch, and that's going to stop them from eating at the table. So just notes, don't eat at your table, set a schedule, and I'm going to show you a couple of the things that setting a schedule helps to do. It'll really avoid burning your team out, and if you can see on a sheet of paper that a convention or a trade show is going to be, let's call it an 8-hour shift, and nobody on your team is used to standing up and interacting for 8 hours, pretty good indication that you should probably split that shift up and maybe put together 2- and 3-hour runs with some good-sized breaks. And if those breaks work out with the show schedule, or if there's a keynote presenter, or anything else at the show that means that the room, the exhibit floor closes, you might just be in good shape. But if you're not, you might have to staff additional people that you weren't originally expecting to. But just please understand that whether that means that there's additional payroll involved for you or not, it is your best case scenario, because having unhappy, hungry, overworked people at your booth are the worst thing you could possibly do for you, your brand, and your company. All right? Having a schedule minimizes confusion. Again, grumpy representatives of your brand don't represent well, and confusion causes that. And you already see that we can avoid having an empty booth because you had to take a walk because nobody was there to relieve you or to eat or drink in your booth. The next thing, she was on her phone in the picture. And this is something we talk about a lot. In fact, Angela from Cose and the entire committee, we sometimes joke around and we mean it respectfully, but we really need everybody to understand that in order to have a successful show, everybody needs to stay off their phones, unless there's a really good reason to be on your phone. So texting friends and family or sending memes about how bored you are, it's just not what you need to be doing. And it sounds funny because I think we've all done it or seen somebody doing it. But stay off your phone and pay attention to humans. It sounds so simple, and we've all been at a dinner or having a conversation with somebody and they reach for their phone. It's no different, people. We really need to make sure that the person that's walking towards our booth and they're on a vector to get to us and shake our hand knows that if we break eye contact for just a moment, or we show them that something else is more interesting to us, there's a really good chance that they're going to move on or go to the next booth or somebody else, and that's a missed opportunity for you. Now, what are the exceptions? We're a very technology-oriented company, and there are some exceptions to what we would say somebody would be able to have their phone out for. I think that showcasing your product or service, if your phone or your tablet is required, is a great idea. You might have an app that shows some information about your products or services. You may have some images that you're trying to show somebody that you have sitting in a gallery on your phone. I think that's completely appropriate when you pull your phone out and use it for that purpose only. But, again, if you're texting, calling, just doing other silly things, checking Facebook, people pick up on it. It's not so great. Posting to social media, speaking of Facebook, is a great item for a show. We're going to talk later about how one of the best things you can do to prime the pump, which is the term we use at Rock the House, is to invite all of your best customers and everybody in the industry that you want to come say hi to you. But posting to social media before the show and during the show shows the rest of the world that couldn't come or that won't be joining you at the show that you're out there, you're busy. And the perception that you're busy means the perception that you're good. It means that you've got opportunities to do business. And while everybody, when they're asked the question, hey, how are things going, they say, oh, they're going great, we're so busy. That's great. Well, you want everybody to think that really the common answer is we're so busy, but we can always take more. And that's what social media posting from a show says. It's that, hey, we're out there pounding the pavement to get our brand message out there and to connect with whoever it is that we need to connect with. Lastly, if you use your phone like a lot of companies do now, Rock the House, while we have business cards, one of the things that we do is we'll actually shake hands with somebody, connect for a few minutes, and then say, hey, you know what, I'm going to give you a business card, but can I send you an email right now that just, the subject line says, nice to meet you? That way you've got my information. You can follow up later. You don't need to give me anything, and I'm going to assume that your email you reply with has your contact info in it, right? And they say, yes, we're good to go. So if you get your phone out and you give somebody the opportunity to email right away or vice versa, it's a great use of your phone. But the kicker is when you're done, put it back in your pocket, put it back on the shelf, etc. Next item, do not staff or hire any negative people at your booth. And I said it earlier in the test, do your staff members want to be there? I have to say this is probably a lagging indicator for a lot of organizations and small companies. Small businesses don't have a really, really deep roster of staff members they can choose from. So this could be an uphill battle for you. You may have had a poor experience at another trade show or convention, or not practiced many of the best practices inside this webinar, and just sort of look on your experience last year at another show and said, you know what, my staff didn't have a good time. I didn't have a good time. And yes, I was probably negative, and yes, I probably rolled my eyes. This is probably the most important slide in my presentation if I have to pick one. And my overall point is that you can have the best trade show booth that you spent $5,000 on, lots of TVs and technology and full color graphics and a soft floor so people feel more comfortable, but if you're a jerk and your face looks like that and you're constantly either rolling your eyes or just not engaging people, I don't really want to talk to you. And I mean that, you know, in a very broad sense. People like to do business with people that they like, and we're going to come to that later, but staff people at your booth that are positive, happy people that are friendly, that want to be there, that will stand on a mountaintop and scream your brand message and really just connect with people. It doesn't get much simpler. If I had to make a litmus test for this, it would be, can the people that are there keep the stamina of smiling or keeping their eyebrows up for a few hours at a time? Now, a few minutes at a time isn't good enough for me. If I have to nudge or bump or remind somebody to smile every 10 or 15 minutes, that person doesn't belong at the show. Okay? Every 2 or 3 hours, that I can deal with. Because if you're not in the industry of hospitality and having that face on all the time, it's hard, it's difficult, and I understand that. Sometimes we need to be reasonable and understanding. Going out and walking the rest of the room is also very important. Consider that if, Angela, we had at SBC, we have almost 70 booths, is that correct?
Correct.
So there's, even if you take one trade show opening at SBC, you have 69 additional opportunities to make an impact with somebody else. And with that said, you also have 69 opportunities to make a negative impact if you don't heed this warning and staff happy, friendly people that understand your message. So if you're taking notes or you're sending yourself an email, underline it, bold it, write it 10 times. Don't staff negative, frowny, nasty people. It's bad. Okay? I said it a second ago. People buy from people they like, so please be likable. That also means don't be disagreeable, and minimizing stress can be a really big thing for this. You could have very likable, fun people, but if you start their day off the wrong way, you could just essentially put everything into a tailspin and you know, miss a couple opportunities, and nobody really wants that. Don't just wing it. You know, the next category is deep. We've got pre-planning. What do you do before, what do you do during, and what do you do after? There should be a strategy, a plan, a roadmap or a blueprint of all the things that you decide to do for any convention. So at SBC, or we'll say a couple other conventions that Rock the House does, we talk about in leadership meetings what it is that we're going to define as success, okay? And defining success comes down to what it is that you need to get out of it to come back next year. So sometimes somebody much higher up the chain at a large organization says, hey, Billy, you're going to go to a trade show and I need you to take 2 people with you, and it's an order. I don't think it's a terrible thing to ask why. What are the goals? Are we looking to sell? Are we looking to impact? Is it brand reinforcement just to make sure that our logo is out there additionally? But if you're a small business, this usually isn't the case. Small businesses go into shows, and Rock the House, in my opinion, is still a small business. We go into a show expecting that it could and should and potentially turn into revenue, and that connections will be established and relationships will be forged. So at that point, if you've ever heard the term SMART goals, specific, and SMART is an acronym for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, or timely. And measurable is probably the most important one when it comes to planning. Keep in mind that if you say that in order for it to be successful, you have to at least make up the same amount of revenue in the calendar year that you spent on the booth, okay? That's a very measurable item. So if you think back, if you were an SBC exhibitor last year, did you make up the amount of revenue that you spent on the booth? The answer may be yes or maybe no. If the answer is yes, congratulations. You just have an example of something measurable that you can do again this year. If the answer is no, you now have a goal. You now have something you can write on the wall with your team to define success. Now our success, they're much greater, and they're much broader than that. We would say that if I have 3 people staffing a booth, okay, and our booths are usually interactive opportunities to get people to come up and say, hey, what do you guys do? We have no idea. It might be, as we did 2 years ago at SBC, we did a giant foosball table. It was 15 feet long. We invited people that were walking past to come play with us. People were really freaked out by it at first because they weren't expecting it. Sometimes we do photo booths, and sometimes we give away T-shirts and other fun things. But we know that if there's 3 staff members there, we want those staff members to each get approximately 25 business cards or make 25 connections over the course of the show. And that's really, really measurable. You could even say that if you have 25 cards for a 2-day show, at the end of day 1, you check in with everybody and say, hey, how many cards do you have? And when you're looking at that list, and that's what this top one is, set goals and define success, I suggest that you build incentives. If you can afford to put something in place, and actually afford doesn't always mean money. Sometimes it can be something that you have laying around or an extra day of paid time off or something of the sort for a staff member. Put together a goal or an incentive for them to do what they need to smile, to get 25 cards, to get 15 people to fill out your web form that you have at the laptop sitting at your booth or on an iPad. It's a really big deal to say, this is what we're going to do. Because at the end of the show or at the end of the first day, you can track it, you can see how well you did, and you can feel good about it. So that if you got the second half of a day or the second day of a show, you walk into it feeling accomplished rather than feeling defeated. The second thing to do before is to role play with your team on the typical interaction. If, let's say you have a 3-person team at a show and 2 of them are in sales every day but 1 of them is not, that 1 person might need some help to be comfortable. And we recommend that you role play. You have somebody standing in front of something that represents your booth, and what are the types of things you're going to say to people when they walk by? Some of the things that are textbook are complimenting somebody on their shoes or on a bag, something that doesn't cross a line of political correctness. Asking them a question, and again, I don't want to be too cliche, but what is it that you're going to do to get somebody's attention other than saying, hey, here's a flyer, or hey, are you in the market for a new bank account? Like these things. What are the things that you can come up with together? And Google's your friend. You can Google phrases like best first phrases at conventions or sales one-liners, and just get some ideas. Distributing materials ahead of time to your team members avoids confusion, as we talked about earlier, and makes them more comfortable. There's nothing worse than being told to show up at a trade show and not knowing anything that you're doing or knowing what the plan is. So if you haven't role-played, you haven't talked about and defined success, and you've never seen the materials, this makes you put in an awkward position where you could be embarrassed about not knowing what you're presenting on. So if somebody comes up and says, oh, hey, I see that you're offering this new program or blah, 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 and you go, oh, you know what, I just got this today. Well, guess what? You just gave me a giant black check mark or red X over wanting to do business with you because you seem unprepared. And if you're unprepared and you got sent to a trade show, your business probably isn't as top-notch as what you may have wanted it to appear. All right? Lastly, and this is a pretty controversial item, and I think it's something that we talk about a lot over dinners with business owners. Inviting your best customers is absolutely a best practice. Okay? Now, if we were all in a room together, I'd ask you to raise your hands for those of you that have felt threatened at one time or another to invite your customers for fear that they may not like what they see, they may not do business with you because they found another supplier at a show, and these are all very, very valid reasons. But I say this to you with all respect. If you aren't bringing your best, they should be and will be doing business with somebody else anyway. So your missed opportunity is this. If we use round numbers and you can invite 100 of your best customers, chances are most of them aren't going to come. And I know that sounds terrible, but the invitation is your missed opportunity. The invitation is your chance to reach out to them and say, hey, dear Susie, I want to let you know we're part of this awesome show. It's called SBC. There's going to be 70 great vendors there to help you in your business, et cetera, et cetera. We'd love to bring you out, love to buy you a cup of coffee, and, boom, boom, boom. And based on scheduling and just how the world works, based on my statistics, I'd say if I had to take a best guess, only a third of the people that you invite that you're close to are actually going to come. And those third are going to be your loyal best customers. And those are going to be the ones that remember from a top-of-mind awareness perspective that you invited them and that you care and that you're thinking about them. Okay? So consistency with this is very important too. I didn't have this in my notes, but I just thought of it. Be sure to invite the same people every year, because if you're active on social media and you're out there touting it, but you invite them one year and don't invite them the next, you can cause a situation. I've gotten text messages that say, hey, I see you're at SBC. I didn't know. Let me know again next year. Invite everybody you can. Make it happen. Make it an effort, and make it fun. Make it something where you say, hey, meet me there, and we'll go grab a drink afterwards at the after party or something of the sort. Okay? So before, lots of pre-planning. Set it all up. I know we talked about checklists before, and that comes again later when I mention it, but write it on the wall. Write it all down. If you don't write it down and you can't measure it, it's not real. At the show, planning is still very important. And while you're there to execute, and you train for, jumping out into the field, you need to have a pre-meeting with your team before the show starts. So if the show begins at 9 a.m., get there at 7:30 or 8. Again, minimize the stress. Get everybody there. Tell them a time that even allows them to be late with traffic, and it doesn't affect the mood of the show. Okay? Buy everybody coffee. Have some bagels there. Get something in their stomach, and then get ready to start. You review your goals. Hey, we're going to have 25 business cards. We're going to sign up this many people. Check in with that, and if that's the time because you haven't already done it, you could also set an incentive and say, you know what? I decided to give away $50 to the person that gets the most business cards today. But you have to each get at least 20 or else it doesn't happen. Okay? Be creative with some incentives. Throughout the day, check in with both the show promoter as well as the people around you about how things are going, including the other people that are in your booth with you. Checking in will give you the ability to talk about this next one, which is to discuss and define success and pivot if you need to. What if what you guys put together as your plan just isn't working? Or what if the goals that you set forth based on show attendance or some other outside factors aren't possible? You don't want to put your team in a situation where that $50 incentive or that 25 business card goal isn't possible. And if as a manager or the person that ultimately represents your brand at that show, you need to pivot, that's the time to do it. So once you do it, halfway through the first day is probably a pretty good indication of what it's going to be. And just don't be scared to make a change. Revising goals is only bad if you're doing it just because you're not being efficient or effective. But if there's other outside influences that are changing how well you can do, switch it up. Just make sure your team stays positive. Having a meeting after the show, and I talk about after for a post-mortem meeting in a second, but having a meeting daily after the show is also quite important. If you're doing a 2-day show, we want you to leave day one with a feeling of success or accomplishment, as I mentioned earlier. And that meeting is very important. So the high five, the great job, we'll see you guys tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. That meeting is super important. So while it may seem optional sometimes to say, hey, Jim, things are kind of slow. It's 4:45. Do you mind if I take off? Please avoid that at all costs. The team starts together and the team ends together. Now, if you've got somebody that happens to need to get home to pick somebody up from daycare, I'm not saying to not let them out. I'm saying that if you can, make sure your team can have a powwow as a group before you break for the day, because it will make all the difference. After the event, and I do mean completely after, do not forget to follow up with prospects. If you have a way with those 25 business cards per person or per representative in your booth, set a deadline and say, hey, show's over, today's Friday, we're going to agree as a team that we're going to follow up with an email, and you might even agree to what the email says, within 48 business hours, two days of business. So by next Tuesday, does everybody understand? Yes. They all nod. You send an email out to the team, and you say, okay, you leave this email in your box until you followed up with all 25 people, and I'd love to hear your feedback. Very, very important. Second, that a post-mortem meeting is a term that comes from trade shows, hospitality, special events. This means after the event is over, let's talk about the team. Let's talk about how we did, what went great, what didn't go great. Do we want to do the show again next year? Does it feel successful to us? That meeting and the notes that you take from that meeting become, just like when you do a budget for your business, the plan and the roadmap for next year. Okay, so doing that, documenting it, putting it in someplace shared, emailing it out, super important. When you realize that you forgot something at the show or something that caused you stress, you need to update your checklist and your plan. And that post-mortem meeting usually defines what those items are. But if you forgot pens, or you forgot Sharpies, or you decided that you wanted to have pins, or you wanted to bring a Polaroid next year, update those lists now while it's still fresh in your head. And that post-mortem meeting, in my opinion, should happen either the same day, which after, I mean, it could be at dinner. You could take your entire team to dinner that night if you don't have a networking opportunity, or you could do it in the couple business days that follow. Lastly, after the meeting, take the opportunity at any chance you can in business, in general, to celebrate with your team. Reward your team, even if it's you saying, because you're a small business, great job, I appreciate you, I know it was hard to smile for 2 days straight. At least tell them that they did nice work so that they know next year that you appreciate them and that it's going to be as successful as it possibly can be. One of the things that I mentioned was the post-mortem meeting. If you can't do a post-mortem meeting because you're hiring contractors or you have something specialty, survey your team. If you need to build a Survey Monkey or other type of online form, you can ask all the same questions, very simply. What are the top 5 things that happened at the show that you thought were successful? What were the bottom 5? What are the things that we really need to change? And do you have any other suggestions or opinions about the show? The feedback from that can be extremely valuable. And whether you do the post-mortem and the survey or just the survey because you have contractors or team members that can't meet you for post-mortem, survey them. It can be very, very important. Don't be scared of the feedback that you get. Not everybody can take criticism constructively, but in a small business, I understand firsthand that the decisions that you make as a leader can sometimes be questioned, and that's okay. It's okay to be vulnerable and to hear from your team that something that you did or said or planned for didn't go well. And it's 2015, almost 2016. People want to be led by individuals that are vulnerable, that understand that they're not superhuman, and that when they give feedback, as long as it's sound and productive, it makes change. Everybody wants to be on that team. I'm getting closer to the end of our presentation here. I just want to tell you that if you can handle these 10 things that we've talked about and really nail some of these things down, you're going to have fun, or you're going to have more fun. Okay? You're going to increase the sales opportunities that you have, or the opportunities to achieve whatever goal it is that you've defined. You will increase brand awareness and engagement, and you will make your team more professional. And I threw this one in here for fun, but I guess there's an outside chance that if you do a really great job and hit a grand slam with your team, you might even get a raise if you do a good job. So everybody wants to hear that word, but I know that if we had a team that put some things together, whether you look at a raise like a huge incentive or an opportunity, or just a chance to say, work didn't suck today. And that's sometimes an upgrade for many people, and I don't want to lose sight of that. I do think that it's not realistic for you to master all of these in one season. Okay, so if your grade, and I don't know what your grades were, if your grade was a 3, you should be okay with nailing 7 on that list. But just remember that everything you do, you might not have the flashiest booth, you may not have the most charismatic individuals. As long as the effort is being made, done is better than perfect. And getting 80% of the way there is better than failing, in my opinion. So choose from the list and other things that we've talked about today for the things that you think are realistic and that are attainable, and do your absolute best. And people will notice. More specifically than attendees and guests, your team will notice, and that can sometimes make all the difference for forward momentum. As I'm wrapping up, one of the statements that I say a lot with my team is decline, delegate, and do. So I don't know whether you listening, you're a business owner, or whether you're somebody who is knighted or voluntold to jump on this webinar today, but all the things we've talked about today. If I've said to you, based on my experience, that you should not eat in your booth, you need to just decide. I'm either going to eat in my booth or I'm not. And for me, that's what the word decline on the screen represents right now. Decision making is about yeses and nos. The first thing you have to do before you waste your time on any policies or procedures is to decide, do you care? Do you care if you have a salad or if anybody sees you taking a sip of Starbucks? And if the answer is no, move on. That's declining. If the answer is yes, and you decide to act on it, or any of these other items, delegate it. Make it happen. Give the team buy-in in order to be on board with these features. So you're not volunteering them to do it. You're saying, hey, in an effort for us to be more professional, to really raise the bar for our brand, we're going to achieve these goals. How do you guys feel about it? Do you agree? Have some conversations about it and delegate that. And lastly, if you can't delegate it and get it done, do it yourself. But as a business owner, one of the things that you learn early on, whether you've mastered it yet, because I know I haven't mastered it, is not to micromanage all the time. Okay? We can do our absolute best, but the fact remains that if we don't hire and put people around us that are as good or better than we are, we're probably going to be B- or C+ business owners for the rest of our lives. So I've done my absolute best to do only the things that I need to after I can't find really great people to do it. But I understand, because I put lots of sweat in, that if you're a small business owner or you're a small business, you have to put lots of time and effort into it, and you might only be a 2-person team, and that's very important. That wraps my presentation. I think that we're going to be moving on to questions with Angela here in the next few minutes, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Matt. I know I learned some extra things myself. So I'm sure that everybody's busy taking notes. I know I got a couple requests for your presentation. Is it okay if we send it out to the group afterwards?
Certainly. I can provide you with a PDF that you can send out. The only thing I would ask is that the PDF not be published. And in the event that you would like to reference it and publish it, simply send me an email and tell me what the uses are going to be, and I'll tell you whether we're comfortable or not.
Wonderful. Thank you. So, first question. This first question, I believe I can answer on behalf of SBC, and Matt, you can weigh in from other conferences and conventions that you've been to. Is there an opportunity to have access to the registered attendees' email info before the convention to invite them to stop by our booth? On behalf of SBC, we do not share that information prior to the convention, and that is mainly because we can't have 70-plus emails plus our own organizational emails going out to all the attendees, or else it would be considered spam at that point. However, we do promote the exhibitors heavily ourselves, and once we launch our mobile app for the events this year, there will be a lot of opportunities for attendees to see where every exhibitor booth is, who they are, access their website, and we will be sending push notifications to all attendees during exhibit hall hours, or prior to the exhibit hall breaks, to make sure people know when the exhibit hall breaks are. So that's for SBC. Matt, if you could, I'm not sure in your experience if that's a common practice or not.
Well, we talk about a sales technique called the 5 ways when we look at the difference between prospects or suspects, prospects, and then people that you actually drill down to. So the point is that you want to connect and potentially do business, but you also want to qualify the people that are with you. It is not a best practice to email a mass list prior to a show. It is a best practice to email your best customers or your prospects and invite them to the show. That is the difference between being personal and being spammy. It's also illegal, for instance. SBC and anybody who runs an email server can get smacked pretty hard for allowing anybody to use a list of that type. So I only bring this up because even after the show, even if SBC or any other convention that you're part of shares a list that you can email, and sometimes you have to generate your own, you need to be very careful, because if the guests that were on site did not specifically opt in or double opt in, which is what the IMAP rules in America are, you can get your services shut down. So long story short, we find that the best practice is making your booth compelling to collect information, and for the guests or vendors that are surrounding you to essentially on site say, yes, I'd like more information. And that is your best chance, because even if I can get 800 names, I can't manage 800 names. I can manage 75. And that's the nugget, is to qualify the people on site and to do with the information what is responsible and realistic.
Great, thank you. Next question is it a good idea to have a demo set up at the booth?
I think it's a great idea to have a demo set up at your booth. I think that it matters a bit what your industry is or what it is that you're trying to showcase, but anything that sets you apart from a 6-foot table with a young lady texting and eating behind it is a winner, okay? If you have a chance to set up a demo, if you are a roofing company and you want to show how awesome your roof product is, then set it up so people can touch it. Maybe nobody's touched a shingle before, or a tin roof, or whatever it might be. If you are selling water filters, then you want to show something that's reverse osmosis. I think that anything you can show that has something interactive or a demonstration is great. I didn't get into it because I didn't want it to go too techy, but we're a technology company. The use of interactive media is also great. If you can do a television screen at your booth, if you can afford that or you have the capability of producing that media, it can go a long way. It also gives guests a chance, or attendees a chance from a distance, to see other pieces other than just your backdrop. So it's like a billboard for you. Consider it. Demonstrations, billboards, active media, anything compelling. That's the word if I were to give you a nugget. Compelling is the key. There you go.
Okay, I'm assuming the next question is in relation to the small business convention. And Matt, since you're pretty involved with public auditorium, maybe you know the exact answer. I'm not sure. How tall are display booths allowed to be?
Okay, typically when you buy a booth space, and I think that we could maybe divert part of the question after the fact to the contact. If you haven't made contact yet, or you've already purchased a booth with Courtney, correct?
Yes. With
SBC. Courtney is the one handling all the fantastic reservations. I know that the show is either sold out or very close to being sold out, which is great.
As of yesterday, there were only 3 left.
That's fantastic. And I understand that we might stretch our legs and move to another part of the building if we've got great inquiries for it. So airspace, as it's called. Airspace is defined by the show promoter so that we don't avoid or upset other vendors. Now, at the SBC show, I'll tell you that besides Rock the House and SBC booth spaces, we've never had another vendor go tall that I can think of. Okay? So what that means is I don't think that in the paperwork for SBC, and I'm making assumptions, Angela, that there are any restrictions, but I will tell you, for all of you that are listening, if you intend to make a statement and go big, you just need to run it past Courtney to make sure that it won't be upsetting or obstructing anybody else's booth. What types of obstructions do we mean? Well, there's signage that's being flown in the main room at Public Hall, and while the ceiling at Public Hall is higher than 30 feet, if there's a banner that Cose puts up 20 feet behind your booth and you go 18 feet tall, you could be obstructing the banner. So these are just things that we need to talk through, make sure that we have out in the open, and again, all about planning. But most conventions assume that you're not going to be any taller than about 10 feet at your booth. And Angela, this year, will we be having drape around the booths?
Yes.
So attendees should know that while they're going to build their own booth space, they do have a nice box and a frame built out of drape. Is that correct?
Correct.
And what color is that drape?
Black.
Okay, so for complementary colors in planning, you should all know that you'll have black drape at least on the back of your booth and potentially in between you and another vendor on your left or right.
And if you have something specific in mind, we can talk after this call or next week sometime, and we'd be happy to find out exact details for you to answer your questions. That doesn't help.
Excellent.
That concludes our Q&A for today. Thank you so much, Matt, for sharing your expertise on this. If anybody has any additional questions, please reach out to me, and I'd be happy to connect you with Matt. In the meantime, we thank you for signing in today, and if you have any questions about the Small Business Convention, please reach out to me or my partner, Adina Magda, or you can go to the website at smallbizconvention.com. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing all of you in a couple of weeks.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, Matt.